Hello YouTube, this is Omid here with a closer analysis of the Ray Gun Mark II. I've decided to take a more in-depth look at the Ray Gun Mark II, not just talking about what has been seen, but speculating on how you obtain it, how it's used, what it is basically. So, how you obtain the Mark II. Now there are three possibilities that I can think of at this point on how you could realistically obtain the Ray Gun Mark II. First is just getting it out of the random box like any other weapon. The second is to upgrade the standard ray gun in a crafting table similar to the blunder gat being turned into the acid gat, or pack-a-punching the ray gun receiving the Mark II rather than the Porter's X2. It has been confirmed that the Mark II will be available on every map in Black Ops 3, therefore an augmentation is unlikely as many maps such as Town, Farm and Nuketown do not have any crafting tables, so there isn't anywhere to actually build it on most of the maps in Black Ops 2. Also, the appearance of the Mark II is very sleek, not unlike the crude tools you normally craft and use tables. And if they were actually going to put crafting tables into the new maps, they'd have to add new parts into it anyway. And even maps like Transit and Diaries, there aren't any free tables where you could even build it, so it's pretty unlikely that the Mark II has upgraded for the standard ray gun in a crafting table. It's not a very likely option. Obtaining the Mark II from the random box is a possibility, but to work with the engine limitations in maps such as Transit and Mob of the Dead, it would have to replace a current weapon from the box to avoid overloading the map, and the most likely choice for what gun to replace would be the current ray gun. And removing the ray gun and replacing it with the Mark II would be controversial because apparently the ray gun is a fan favourite, so they don't really want to risk upsetting fans by removing the ray gun, which has been in every zombies map in history, with the Mark II, just to have the Mark II in these maps. Therefore, for the Mark II to be available from the box, you'd have to either increase the capacity of the maps to allow them to handle more, which is just physically impossible, or remove something in the box at present. Most likely alternative would be the ray gun, which is just, they're not going to remove a ray gun to put in the Mark II, so obtaining the Mark II from the box is unlikely, but still possible. Therefore, by process of elimination, I have to say that pack-a-punching the original ray gun to obtain the Mark II is the most likely choice. I mean, we saw Mob of the Dead Treyarch was experimenting with pack-a-punching, changing the model of a gun rather than just giving it a new camo with the blunder gat. It looked completely different, had a different model when you pack-a-punched it. Also, at the moment, pack-a-punching the ray gun it's sort of kind of useless. It's just a way to restock ammo from it, because it doesn't really add anything to the weapon. It just makes it a bit more powerful and changes the colour of the shots. But with this idea, they scrapped the Porter's X2 model of the ray gun, which gives enough room to add the Mark II inside the maps that are close to the limit, such as Mob of the Dead. And it gives players a choice, because if they like the original style of the ray gun, you can stick with the standard model. But if you want the Mark II, you pack-a-punch it. Now, of course, this does have its own problems because not every map in Black Ops 2 has a pack-a-punch machine. Therefore, you couldn't obtain the Mark II, and they've said that you can obtain it in every map. However, the maps that don't have a pack-a-punch machine aren't exactly pushing the engine to the limit, so there would technically be room to add the Mark II in the box. So if they want to fulfill their promise of a Mark II in every map, they could have it as a pack-a-punch in some maps, and then as a box alternative for the other, so mixing between the two. So I think the most likely way to obtain the Mark II is by pack-a-punching the ray gun, but simply obtaining it from the random box is still a possibility. Now onto the usage of the weapon itself. Now from what gameplay there is and what Zelensky said about it, the Mark II is quite a lot different from the original ray gun. The original ray gun fires slower than bullet projectiles, which explode on contact, causing splash damage to both zombies and the player. However, the Mark II appears to fire laser-like projectiles which travel at bullet speed or infinite speed, and can penetrate through several zombies at a time, and has a flame effect to zombies it hits, but that is most likely aesthetic. However, the Mark II would cause no splash damage to the player. Therefore, the Mark II is a different take on the ray gun, in that it's superior to taking out lines or trains of zombies, and removes the risk of splash damage to the player, which means it's well suited to the close quarters environment like Brood, where you can line up zombies easily. However, the removal of the explosive element of the ray gun in the Mark II would make it less useful in taking out groups of zombies that aren't perfectly lined up. Also, as a final note, in the gameplay of the use of the Mark II ray gun, there's the unmistakable flash of a PPU, and the gameplay doesn't correlate with any known way to obtain a PPU, which therefore means that there's a new PPU that will be added in the map pack, It's unlikely that this PPU would be related exclusively to the Mark II ray gun, but apart from hip firing, I can't really see any other way that would be a PPU being earned in that shot, so maybe the Mark II ray gun will have its own special PPU to go along with it, but we'll have to see. Anyway, this has been Agent. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.